Cancer. There is a phrase I want to examine before we go further because the phrase shapes how the rest of what I share will be received. The phrase is behind your back. It is a phrase that, in common usage, has accumulated a negative connotation. It tends to make people think of betrayal, of plotting, of harmful activity occurring while they cannot see it. But the phrase, taken at its literal level, just means activity that is happening outside your awareness. Activity outside your awareness is not inherently negative. Much of what shapes our lives happens outside our awareness, in the lives of other people, in the development of conditions that we cannot directly observe. Some of that activity is favorable to us. Some of it is favorable in ways that are surprising when we eventually discover it. The activity I am sensing for you right now is of the favorable kind. It is happening behind your back in the literal sense, in places you cannot see, but the substance of it is in your favor. I want to walk you through what is occurring, because the unfolding has its own particular character that deserves attention. There are people in your life, and possibly some people you have not yet met, who have been making choices and engaging in conversations that affect your situation in ways you do not yet know about. The choices are favorable. The conversations are about you in ways that build toward outcomes you would welcome. The activity has been ongoing for some period of time, accumulating into something that is now reaching the point where its effects will become visible to you. The effects will arrive as if from nowhere, but they will not actually be from nowhere. They will be from the accumulation of all the activity that has been occurring in your favor while you have been continuing your ordinary life. I want to describe what kinds of things are happening. People have been speaking your name in contexts that you would not have expected. Some of those mentions have been straightforwardly favorable, expressing appreciation or admiration for qualities you have demonstrated. Some of the mentions have been more practical, recommending you for opportunities or arrangements that have not yet been formalized. Some have been quieter, just the regular thinking of you that occurs in the minds of people who care about you, which contributes to the field of goodwill that surrounds your life, even when you cannot see it directly. I want to share something specific about what these mentions accomplish over time. Each individual mention may seem small. The cumulative effect of many mentions across multiple contexts builds into something more substantial. The substance accumulates the way a reputation accumulates, gradually, through many small contributions, until it has the weight to actually affect what becomes possible. Your reputation has been accumulating in this way. The accumulation has reached the point where it is producing effects that you will soon notice. The effects will include opportunities that arrive seemingly out of nowhere, invitations that surprise you with their source, connections that form for reasons that are not immediately apparent. All of these are downstream of the accumulating mention. I want to address what I am sensing about a specific situation that may unfold in the coming period. There is a particular conversation that has occurred or is about to occur between people who are in a position to affect your situation in some specific way. The conversation is favorable. It involves people who, in the course of discussing various matters, have arrived at a view of you that has prompted them to consider doing something on your behalf. The doing may take various forms. It may be an introduction. It may be a recommendation. It may be the offer of an opportunity. It may be the inclusion of you in arrangements you would not otherwise have been part of. The specific form will reveal itself when the time is right. What I can tell you is that the conversation is real and that it will produce real effects. I want to take a moment to address you because you are about to learn something about your own situation that may surprise you with its warmth. The information that people have been engaged in favorable activity on your behalf can produce a complicated emotional response. You may feel moved by the realization that you have been more cared for than you realized. You may feel surprised by the identity of some of the people involved. You may feel a kind of vindication that some of your worth has been recognized in ways you had not been aware of. All of these responses are valid. The information is yours to integrate at your own pace. I want to share something specific about who some of these people may be. Some of them are people you know well. They are people who have always been favorable towards you and who continue to be. The favorable activity from them is not surprising. It is just the ongoing expression of their existing regard. Other people involved are people you know less well or possibly do not know directly. They are people who have heard about you through mutual contacts, or who have observed you from a distance, or who have been in rooms where you have been discussed. Their favorable activity is more surprising because you may not have realized that they had a sense of you at all. The unexpected sources of favorable activity are some of the more interesting features of how reputation and goodwill actually operate. I want to mention something specific about how the favorable activity is positioned to affect your concrete life. The effects will not all be obvious at first. Some of them will be modest. A small opportunity, a useful introduction, a piece of information that helps you. Other effects will be more substantial. The substantial effects will probably arrive in clusters rather than singly, because the underlying activity has been building to a level where multiple effects can manifest simultaneously. The clustering may produce, in a particular window of time, a period in which you experience an unusual frequency of favorable developments. The frequency will be noticeable. It will be one of the markers that the underlying activity has reached its expression phase. This is Cancer Tarot, and I want to slow down here because the implications of what I am describing deserve consideration. You have been operating, perhaps without full awareness, with a particular relationship to how your life unfolds. The relationship has included assumptions about how much support you can rely on, how favorable the conditions around you actually are, how many people are aware of you in positive ways. The assumptions have been shaped by what you can directly observe. What you can directly observe is a small portion of what actually affects your life. The larger portion operates outside your awareness, in conversations and choices that you do not witness. The larger portion has, in your case, been more favorable than the assumptions might suggest. The favorability is what is producing what is approaching. I want to address a particular orientation that may be useful as you process this information. Allow yourself to update your assumptions about how supported you actually are. The update may not happen all at once. It may happen gradually as the effects of the favorable activity become more apparent. With each effect, you can let your sense of how the world is treating you adjust slightly upward. The adjusting will produce, over time, a baseline assumption that is more accurate than the previous baseline. The more accurate baseline will inform how you engage with future opportunities. It will allow you to approach situations with the confidence that comes from knowing you are operating in a generally favorable field rather than with the cautious tentativeness of someone who assumes the field is neutral or hostile. I want to share something specific about what kind of person attracts the activity I am describing. Not everyone has this kind of favorable activity occurring on their behalf. The activity tends to occur on behalf of people who have demonstrated specific qualities over time: reliability, generosity, the kind of presence that other people enjoy and want to support, the substance of character that produces good outcomes in interactions. You have these qualities. The activity is responding to the qualities. You did not have to perform anything in particular to produce the activity. You simply had to be who you have been being. The being is what has produced the response. I want to address something specific about how to think about the people who have been favorable toward you. They are not doing you a favor that creates an obligation. They are simply responding to who you are. Their responses are appropriate to what they have observed. You do not owe them disproportionate gratitude or reciprocation. You owe them, at most, the basic acknowledgement that any human being owes to people who have been kind. The acknowledgement can take many forms: a thank you when the opportunity arises, a reciprocal favor when the chance presents itself, the maintenance of your own goodwill toward them. None of these requires anything elaborate. The simplicity is part of what makes the dynamic sustainable. I want to mention something specific about what may not be happening, in case it is useful. The activity I am sensing is not the activity of people who are positioning themselves for some manipulation. It is not strategic. It is not designed to extract something from you that you would not freely give. It is just goodwill in action. The goodwill is real because it does not have a hidden agenda. The hidden agenda, when present in other situations, is what makes activity behind one's back genuinely concerning. The absence of hidden agenda is what makes the current activity benign rather than concerning. You can receive it without suspicion. I want to share an orientation about what to do practically as the effects of the activity begin to become visible. The most useful approach is openness. When opportunities arrive, give them serious consideration. When introductions are made, follow through on them. When information comes to you through channels that seem surprising, treat the information as worthy of attention rather than dismissing it because the source is unexpected. The openness will allow you to engage with the favorable effects in ways that produce their full benefit. Without openness, some of the effects may pass you by because they require your active engagement to fully materialize. I want to mention something specific about your own continued role in producing more favorable activity. The activity that is currently occurring is responding to who you have been being. If you continue to be who you have been being, more activity will continue to occur. The continuation is one of the more important practical implications of this reading. You do not need to change anything significant about how you have been operating. You just need to continue. The continuing produces the conditions for the activity to continue producing favorable effects. I want to address a possible concern. There may be a part of you that wonders whether the favorable activity is sustainable or whether it might shift to less favorable activity at some point. The wondering is reasonable. I want to address it. The activity is sustainable because it is grounded in your qualities, which are durable. Qualities can be undermined by sustained behavior that contradicts them, but you have not been engaging in such behavior. You have been continuing to express the qualities that produce the favorable activity in the first place. The continuation maintains the conditions. The conditions maintain the activity. The cycle is self-sustaining as long as the underlying qualities are sustained. I want to share something about what your life may look like as the effects of the favorable activity become more apparent. You will probably notice that things flow more easily than they used to. Situations that would have required significant effort to navigate may resolve themselves with less effort than expected. Opportunities that previously would have required you to seek them out may arrive without your seeking. People who would previously have been distant may engage with you with more warmth. The easing of these various dimensions of your life is not coincidence. It is the practical manifestation of the favorable conditions that have been building. This is Cancer Tarot, and I want to address what I think is the most significant element of this reading. The significant element is the reframe of how you understand your own situation. You have been operating with assumptions about the world that have been calibrated to less favorable conditions than the actual condition. The recalibration of your assumptions to match the actual conditions is one of the deeper gifts of this period. The gift will continue to unfold as more evidence of the actual conditions becomes available to you. Each piece of evidence will support the recalibration. The cumulative effect will be a transformed sense of your relationship to the world. I want to mention something specific about a particular emotional response that may arise during this period. You may experience moments of being deeply moved by realizing how much care has been operating in your direction without your awareness. The moments may surprise you with their depth. The depth is appropriate. It is the response of someone who has been carrying a sense of being more alone than they actually were, and who is now discovering that the aloneness was partly inaccurate. The discovery can produce strong emotion. Allow it. The allowing is part of how the recalibration occurs at a deep level. I want to share something specific about the people who have been thinking of you. They have included some unexpected figures. Some of them are people from your past who have continued to think of you favorably even after the active period of your relationship with them has passed. Some of them are people you have only met briefly, but who registered something significant about you in the brief meeting. Some of them are people you do not yet know who have heard about you from mutual contacts. The wide range of sources is one of the features that makes the activity substantial. It is not concentrated in a single relationship. It is distributed across many relationships, contributing to a general field of goodwill. I want to address what may be useful to do with this information. You can use it as orientation. Operate going forward with the understanding that you are surrounded by more goodwill than your previous assumptions allowed. The operating with this understanding will inform your engagement with the world. You will be slightly more open to possibilities, slightly more confident in social situations, slightly more willing to take risks that previous assumptions might have prevented. The slight differences will accumulate over time into a noticeably different way of being in the world. The accumulated differences will produce, in their turn, more favorable outcomes that reinforce the orientation. I want to mention something specific about what may unfold within a particular window of time. There is a window approaching within which several of the favorable developments I have been describing will become visible. The window is not far. Within the window, you will probably experience an unusual concentration of good news, favorable opportunities, supportive interactions. The concentration may be enough to be noticeable as a pattern rather than as isolated events. The noticing will confirm what I have been sharing. The confirmation will deepen your trust in the underlying favorable conditions. I want to take a moment to acknowledge the work you have done that has produced the favorable activity on your behalf. The work has been the long-term work of being a particular kind of person, reliable, substantial, worthy of the attention you have received. The work has not been performed for the purpose of producing favorable activity. It has been the natural expression of who you are. The naturalness is what makes the activity sustainable. Performed virtue tends to attract performed responses. Genuine substance attracts genuine responses. You have substance, the responses are genuine. I want to share an orientation about how to handle the feeling of being supported when it becomes apparent to you. There may be an impulse to protest the support, to insist that you can manage on your own, to deflect what is being offered. The impulse may come from a sense that accepting support compromises some quality of independence that you value. I want to address this. Receiving support does not compromise independence. It is one of the conditions of mature interdependence, which is what mature adult life consists of. You can receive support while remaining independent in the dimensions that matter. The combination of receiving support and maintaining independence is a sophisticated emotional posture. It is achievable. You can develop it through practice in this period. I want to mention something specific about a particular practice that may serve you. When you notice that something favorable has happened that did not require your direct effort, take a moment to acknowledge the activity that may have produced it. The acknowledgement can be internal. You do not need to identify the specific people responsible. You can simply note that something favorable occurred and that the occurrence was probably supported by activity outside your awareness. The noting trains your attention to recognize favorable conditions when they manifest. The recognition deepens your relationship to the favorable conditions, which contributes to their continuation. I want to address something specific about the long-term effects of operating with the awareness that you are supported. People who operate with this awareness tend to develop more substantial lives over time than people who operate with the awareness of being primarily on their own. The substantial lives result from the willingness to take risks, accept opportunities, engage with possibilities that the alone orientation would have ruled out. Your willingness to engage will increase as your awareness of support increases. The increased engagement will produce more development. The developments will accumulate into a life that has more dimensions than the alone orientation would have produced. I want to share something specific about what kind of opportunities may arrive in the coming period as effects of the favorable activity. There may be a work-related opportunity that comes from a direction you did not expect. There may be a social invitation that turns out to be more significant than its surface appearance. There may be an introduction that connects you with a person who plays a meaningful role in your continuing life. There may be a piece of information that arrives at the right moment and proves to be useful. Any or all of these are possible. The specific form will depend on the specific channels through which the favorable activity has been operating. This is Cancer Tarot, and I want to leave you with a particular emphasis. The most important thing for you to hold is the awareness that you are not alone. The aloneness, when you have felt it, has not corresponded to the underlying conditions of your life. The underlying conditions have included substantial favorable activity on your behalf. The discovering of this is one of the gifts of the period you are entering. The gift is durable. Once you know, you cannot unknow. The knowing will inform your continuing life. The informing will be in the direction of greater confidence, greater openness, greater willingness to engage with possibilities. I want to mention one more thing about what is happening. The activity on your behalf has been quiet because it does not seek recognition for itself. The people who have been favorable towards you have not been advertising their favorability. They have just been doing what they do in the natural course of their interactions. The not advertising is one of the markers of genuine goodwill. It does not perform, it just operates. You can trust the operating. The operating is real even when it does not announce itself. I want to share an emphasis on what to do next. Continue your life. Pay slight extra attention to interactions and communications that come from unexpected sources. Receive favorable developments with appropriate gratitude, without inflating the gratitude into something that creates a burden. Allow your sense of how supported you are to update gradually, as evidence accumulates. The updating is the practice. The practice produces, over time, a transformed orientation. The transformed orientation produces more of the favorable conditions that inform the transformation. The cycle continues. The continuing is what you can rely on. I want to acknowledge that the information I have shared may take some time to fully integrate. The integration is not instantaneous. You may notice the integration occurring gradually, as small confirmations accumulate. Each confirmation will deepen your sense that what I have described is real. The deepening will support the practical changes in your orientation that are part of the integration. The whole process may take weeks or months. That is appropriate. Significant orientations do not change instantly. They change through accumulating evidence over time. You are loved. You are supported. You are surrounded by more favorable activity than you have been aware of. The activity is real. It is producing effects that will become visible to you. The effects will continue to occur in their own time, with their own particular forms. You can trust the unfolding. The unfolding is gentle. The unfolding is reliable. The unfolding is good. I want to mention something specific about how this reading should be held in your awareness going forward. Hold it as orientation rather than as specific prediction. The general truth that you are supported is more important than any specific prediction about what form the support will take. The general truth will continue to be true regardless of which specific manifestations occur. The specific manifestations will vary in their forms, but the underlying truth is reliable. Walk forward into the next stretch of your days with the awareness that you are not alone in your life, that activity is occurring in your favor in places you cannot see, and that you have the capacity to receive what arrives with appropriate openness. The capacity is in you. The exercising of it will be sufficient. The sufficient will produce, over time, the conditions that are aligned with who you are. You have done the work that has produced the favorable activity. The work has been long. The work has often been done without immediate recognition. The recognition is now beginning. The recognition will continue to develop. By the time the development has substantially occurred, you will be operating from a transformed understanding of your relationship to the world. The transformation is one of the deeper gifts of this period. Here on Cancer Tarot, the closing emphasis I want to leave with you is this. You are seen by more people than you know. You are valued in more context than you are aware of. You are supported by activity that has been occurring outside your direct observation. All of this is real. None of it requires your active management. It just requires your willingness to receive what arrives and to continue being who you have been being. The activity is in your favor. The favor is real. The real will continue to express itself in ways you will encounter. The encountering will produce the recognitions that confirm what I have shared. The confirmations will deepen your trust. The trust will inform your continuing life. The informing will produce the life that is meant for you. The meant for you is approaching in forms that include, but are not limited to, the favorable activity I have described. You are exactly where you need to be in relation to all of this. Stand here, continue your life. The continuing will produce the rest will be good. The rest will include the manifestations of the favorable activity alongside many other developments that contribute to the substance of your continuing existence. Trust this. Trust yourself. Trust the unfolding. The unfolding is gentle. The unfolding is reliable. The unfolding is yours. You are loved by your own life. The life has been arranging itself in your favor. The arrangement is now becoming visible. The visibility will continue to grow. The growing will produce the conditions in which your life feels increasingly aligned with who you actually are. The alignment is the deeper gift. The gift is yours. Receive it. It is here. It is forming. It is approaching. The approaching is gentle. You are ready. The reading is closing. The chapter is opening. Walk in. The chapter is good. The chapter is yours.